Hey, and welcome to the highlights of episode number 219 with Susan Piver. Some of my favorite parts of this episode were when she shares the 4 noble truths about relationships. Everyone needs to know these truths. I also loved it when she shares the hardest and most powerful questions that you need to ask yourself before you get married. And I loved it when she talks us through the first place that we need to start when we find ourselves going through a challenging time in our relationship. But there is so much more wisdom, knowledge, and inspiration that you get in the full episode. So, to listen to the full podcast and get all the info in the show notes, head on over to melissaambrosini.com/219 right now. Welcome, Susan. I am so excited to have you on the show. But before we go any further, I would love for you to tell your story. How did you get to where you are today doing the incredible work that you now do?
My whole life has been an exercise in serendipity, I would say. And I'm not trying to be, cute or minimize the amount of work and the ups and the downs and so forth. But I was getting married and I went to the bookstore to look for books about this really like the most important commitment I think you could probably ever make in your life. And all the books that I found were about outfits. And, I like a good outfit, but there was nothing about like the deeper meaning of how do you actually make this commitment honestly. And I loved this person that I was going to marry. And I didn't want to, be dishonest by saying things like, I promise I'll always love you, because I just knew that that was not going to happen, that there would be love and it would go away and it would come back. And anyway, so I started to think, well, what do I know about how this person sees our life together? I know what it's like to love him, and I know what it's like to, go out with him, but where does he want to live? And what is his kid going to call me? And anyway, I just started writing these questions down, and it became a really interesting exercise for us. We didn't agree on hardly anything, but didn't matter. What mattered was we had the conversations that we needed to have. And somebody said, well, that would be a good book. And through happenstance, it became a book, and then it became a very successful book. And then I was able to write more books. And during this time, I had always been a Buddhist. I've been a Buddhist for 25 years, but it was just something I did on my own. But as my marriage progressed, I was finding that my Buddhist practice was serving me more and more when we would disconnect, and it showed me how we could reconnect. And I just thought, why doesn't everyone know this? So my teaching career had sort of evolved at that point, and I wrote this next book, The 4 Noble Truths of Love. So that's kind of a short version, but, I don't want to take forever telling you my whole life story.
So with divorce rates on the rise, why is it so hard to make relationships work these days? Like what is going on?
From what I can see, it has something to do with the stories that we tell ourselves about love and the deepening role that these stories have in the way we look at other human beings. A lot of the books about relationships, some of which are great, I've personally benefited from some really remarkable books about relationships. However, 99% of them, and I don't think I'm exaggerating, are about how to get love. 0% are about how to love. And somehow we have what I call image poisoning when it comes to many things, but relationships included. We want the partner that looks a certain way. We want the home that looks a certain way. The relationship that when we talk about it, we can use certain words. We look at it, our relationships, as movies that we are seeking to cast people in. And it's unsoulful.
Before we dive into the Four Noble Truths about relationships, can you tell us about some of the questions that we should ask ourselves? I know you've got 100, but what are some of the biggies that we should ask ourselves before we say I do, before we embark on this contract with this person?
Mhm. So, in terms of the hard questions, there are certain questions that are deal breakers. Not very few, but some, and it depends on the couple, are. For example, do you want children? That is a question that if you have different answers, there is no compromise position. For some people, questions of religion and faith are deal breakers. So the deal breaker questions are different for different people. But another one is something along the lines of, how much money do you think is enough? But with the exception of those few deal breaker questions, it doesn't matter if you have the same answers in any of the other questions. It really doesn't. That was my interesting revelation. What matters is that you know each other. And the process of answering the questions is a process of deepening intimacy, not of checking things off a list. It's, who are you? And this is who I am. And the key thing to remember, again, is just because you love someone does not mean you will love your life together. So to pay someone else and yourself the courtesy of examining your views of life is a great kindness.
Let's move on to the Four Noble Truths about relationships. So, can you tell us what these Four Noble Truths are?
The entire Buddhist path is based around something called the Four Noble Truths. And they're the very first teachings given by the Buddha upon his attainment of enlightenment. And they are the following. The first noble truth is the truth, which according to the Buddha is life is suffering because things change. Even the satisfying moments go away. So it's the truth of impermanence. It's the first noble truth. The second noble truth is called the cause of suffering, which is grasping in this case, which basically means pretending the first noble truth isn't true and trying to create permanence in your life anyway. The third noble truth is called the cessation of suffering, which says, now that you know the truth, you also know the cure, which is stop doing that. Of course, it's not that simple. But the fourth noble truth is called the eightfold path, the right speech, right livelihood, and so on. And those are the 8 steps that you can take to stop grasping and therefore stop suffering. So at one point in my marriage, we were in a rough spot. We couldn't stand being around each other. We hurt each other's feelings. We had this massive disconnect. And I was sitting at my desk one day crying, and I thought, maybe it's over. I don't want it to be over, but I have no idea where to begin fixing this. And then my immediate next thought was, begin at the beginning. At the beginning are 4 noble truths. So I started thinking about them, the suffering and the cessation and so on. And I was like, wow, that doesn't help. I don't get why that's helpful. But then I started to try to apply the logic, the truth, the cause of the suffering, the cessation of the suffering, and the actual real life steps you can take to resolve the suffering. And I saw that the 4 noble truths magically sort of rearranged themselves in my mind to apply to my marriage. And the first noble truth of love is relationships never stabilize. Relationships are uncomfortable. So just like the first noble truth of Buddhism, things are impermanent. Well, every phase of your relationship is also impermanent. And thinking that they should be comfortable is actually what creates a lot of the discomfort. That's the second noble truth, thinking that my relationship should be comfortable. If you give up that idea, well, it's not supposed to make me comfortable. It's supposed to be fascinating. It's supposed to be enlivening. It's supposed to be confounding. It's supposed to be interesting. It's supposed to be mysterious. Comfortable? I don't know. And the third noble truth is meeting the discomfort together is love as much as anything else. So A good partner is someone who will, when problems arise, like sort of turn to face you and talk it out. That's great. That's a really good partner. A fantastic partner, an amazing partner, is one who, rather than turning to face you, will sort of turn to stand shoulder to shoulder with you to look out at the arc of the ride that you're on right now. And then the fourth, the noble truth, the final noble truth of love is there's a way to do it. So there are three sort of categories of actions that you can take. And they're actually based on the cycle of the spiritual journey, which always begins with establishing a foundation. You create the foundation. And if you don't create the foundation, your spiritual journey is just a weird kind of wandering. The foundation is essential. So how do you create the foundation in a relationship? So what are the foundational qualities that without these, you may be having a kick-ass love affair, but you're probably not having a relationship. And those qualities are, first, honesty, which doesn't mean blurting out what you think when you think it. Honesty is predicated on knowing the truth yourself about what you feel and who you are and what you're looking for, or that you don't know who you are right now or how you feel or what you're looking for, and that you're able to share that skillfully, and that the person you are in a relationship with is also able to do that. And the second foundational quality, which sounds maybe kind of prosaic, is I call good manners. It means being aware of and thoughtful about the other person. If you're with someone that can't be thoughtful, that will not think about you, then again, you could have a great love affair, but it would be very hard and even impossible to have a relationship. So then the next quality is what also happens in the spiritual path once you have a basic foundation, which is your heart opens. I can't explain why, I don't know why, but every wisdom tradition in the world says, if you do this practice, if you walk this path, your heart will soften. And it's true.
For someone listening who may be going through an incredibly challenging or difficult time with their partner right now, what would you suggest be the first step?
The first step always is self-compassion. Compassion for yourself means allowing yourself to feel what you actually feel without judgment, without commentary, without manipulation. So the first step is always sitting with what you feel and allowing it to be there. The story is thoughts. Those may be very useful thoughts, but they're not included in feeling. First is feeling. Then you develop a kind of softness toward yourself. You allow yourself to be who you are. And the key to solving difficulties in relationships and otherwise is genuineness. Being who you are. And unless you know who you are, unless you stop to give her voice, then you can't be true. You can't be authentic. And to show up with the truth of your feelings is the beginning of changing a difficult situation, I would say.
Now, let's shift gears a little. I want you to pretend that you have a magic wand and you could put one book in the school curriculum of every single high school around the world. What is one book that you would choose?
One book comes immediately to mind, and it is called Shambhala, The Sacred Path of the Warrior. A warrior is one who is not afraid of herself. That's the definition of warriorship. And that's the definition of how you become the person who can bring more goodness to your world and to the world, is to first not be afraid of yourself.
Now, let's talk about how your day looks. Do you have a particular morning routine that you do? I would love if you could share with us how you prime yourself for the day.
I have my own little methods. So I wake up in the morning, and the first thing I do before I get out of bed is I think of my teachers. I see their faces. I bring their faces to my mind, and I thank them. I literally look at them in the eyes, in my mind's eye. And I feel that if I carry that appreciation for what I've been given into my day before I even step foot out of the bed, I've already had a good day. So I come to my office, which is in the little apartment next door to our apartment, which is a great commute. It's a separate space, but it's literally 19 steps away. I've counted. And I open my shrine and light some candles. And then I sit on my couch and feel. I don't know how else to describe it. I just feel. Sometimes I write down what I feel. Sometimes I don't, but I take stock of myself. Some days I feel good. Some days I don't feel good. Then I do my practice, my meditation practice. And then I try to write something, up to around 500 words, which for me is a very good day. And then I meet with my assistant at 9:45 every morning because I have an online community called the Open Heart Project, which is very, very important to me, very dear to me. It's 20,000 people all over the world who get meditation instruction from me. And I offer them classes and workshops and so forth. So that's the lion's share of my day, is serving that community.
That's beautiful.
What's
Thank you for
yours?
sharing.
You're welcome. But can I ask you, what is yours? I'm curious.
Yeah, absolutely. I allow myself to wake up when my body wants to wake up. And sometimes that's 4 a.m. and sometimes that's 6. And so I just allow my body to wake when it wants to wake. And depending if it is really early, I'll kind of sneak out and leave my husband and I will go and do a 20-minute meditation, like on the couch or just somewhere by myself. And then if we kind of wake at the same time, we'll have a cuddle and say good morning, and we say what we're grateful for together.
Mm.
And then we might meditate together depending on what he's got on that morning. And then I do some sort of movement. So whether that's getting out into nature and walking or going to a Pilates class or something like that. And I do a lot of other Ayurvedic practices like tongue scraping and oil pulling in between there. And I drink a massive glass of clean filtered water with some lemon juice and a pinch of salt in it.
Mm.
And then, shower and get ready for my day. But, it's not a strict must do this, then this. It depends on really what time I wake up, really.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah. And for me, connecting with my husband is very important. So, have a cuddle and have a little chat. And sometimes it's 5 minutes and sometimes it's longer. Our day flows so much more smoothly and effortlessly because we've taken that time to just connect with each other and honor each other and just check in with each other. And it really sets the tone for the day. It's something that we love doing at this time in our life.
That is so nice. I love that. And what you're describing sounds so good. I feel like that sounds beautiful. And you sound like you are in a wonderful relationship and you are a wonderful partner. And it's lovely to hear about your relationship.
Yeah, and it's not all rainbows and butterflies. And
Sure.
it's something that we're both incredibly conscious of working on. And I talk about this in my book, Open Wide. One of the biggest things that has really helped us in our relationship is what I call CCC, crystal clear communication.
Oh.
And this has been one of the biggest things in our relationship that has allowed us to continue to grow and evolve. And there's only ever a breakdown in our relationship when one of us hasn't practiced that. It's so important. That communication is so important.
I could not agree more. I could not agree more. And it begins with knowing the truth yourself. Introspection and time with yourself, and then communication is more possible.
Absolutely. Now, I've got 3 little rapid fire questions. Are you ready?
I am.
What is one thing that we can do today for our health?
Get a little more sleep.
Awesome. I agree. What is one thing that we can do for more wealth, so more abundance in all areas of our life?
appreciate what you have right now.
Yeah, beautiful. And what is one thing we can do for more love in our life?
Appreciate your own longing for love.